Power armor is one of Fallout's most iconic features. It's on almost every game cover, and it's almost always the strongest armor you can find and wear in the games. But here's a question. With so many power armors in the Fallout franchise, just which kind of power armor is the strongest? Let's start with the granddaddy, T-45, the first suit. T-45 was the first functional and mass-produced power armor, giving rise to every other power armor, and it's the first one we'll go over. The T-45 is not the strongest, because it's the best. As far as the Fallout TV series shows, it started out as being the worst, but it's the foundation for our list of the strongest, because it was the first time the US military successfully turned a human into mechanized infantry, the first time that a tank could be placed on top of a soldier, without all the complexities and additional infantrymen needed to operate it. West Tech began developing power armor in August 2065, and the T-45 became the first design of its kind to see battlefield use, a two-legged walking armored unit. The T-45 was first deployed in 2067 on the Alaskan front as a direct counter to the Chinese offensive in the Sino-American War. That deployment matters, because Alaska wasn't just a generic war zone. It was the moment the US both began showing the full extent of its power, and also punctured a hole in itself that it couldn't patch out in slow motion. Power armor shows up, and suddenly the battlefield changes. The T-45 is explicitly framed as less mobile than later versions, but still revolutionary because it let troops wield heavy ordnance with ease, and survive punishment that would shred normal infantry. Obviously, the armor was still vulnerable to heavy blasts from artillery or electromagnetic pulses, even simple anti-armor ammunition, but it was simple enough that it laid the groundwork for over half a dozen additional pre- and post-war variants, from the New California Republic's salvaged power armor to Garahan Mining's excavator power armor. That's basically the whole idea of power armor in a nutshell. The soldier becomes the weapons platform, making tanks obsolete, or at least man-portable. Now, let's be honest, the T-45 has a very early model look and feel. It's the suit that looks like it has bolts in places that should not have bolts. In Fallout 3, recon armor is typically worn under the suit just to properly interface with it, a concept that would be expanded on in Fallout 4 and 76. It's the suit that probably squeaks when it walks, but what constitutes strength isn't only about how thick the plating is, it's also about impact. And the T-45 has arguably the biggest impact of any suit on this list, because it's the moment the arms race starts. The games treat T-45 as a foundational suit, common enough to exist in surplus amounts, but still a major upgrade from combat and even riot gear, though it's on par with the Elite and Desert Ranger variants shown in Lonesome Road and Honest Hearts. Just ignore that the TV show introduces a severe flaw in the chest cavity in the armor. In food terms, the T-45 is the first pancake of power armor. It's not perfect, but without it, you don't get the rest of a full, hearty breakfast. And if the T-45 is the first pancake, the T-51 is where the chef suddenly remembers they went to culinary school. T-51, the war winner. The T-51 is where power armor stopped being a rushed miracle and became a refined doctrine, formally designated as Powered Infantry Armor Model T-51. Built by West Tech under US government contract, it was described as West Tech's single largest contract, and the final result speaks for itself. After a 10-year development cycle, it entered service in June 2076, following a mere 9 months of final testing at Fort Strong. As soon as it entered service, it solidified its status by, according to reports from the front, chewing through enemy tanks and armor like they were paper, and even surrendering when they caught sight of the T-51 troops hauling their miniguns. If that doesn't tell you how effective it was, nothing will. A few months later is when the suit does the thing that really makes it legendary. It became instrumental to the Battle of Anchorage, where it's commonly treated as its big debut, and its use minimized US casualties in the assault. From the Yukon to the Yangtze, the T-51B is not just a suit, it's an era marker. It's the suit that symbolizes the US finally getting its footing back in the war, and after the Great War, it stays prized specifically for its protective qualities. That's Fallout's way of saying, even after 2 centuries of scavenging and improvisation, people still look at this thing and go, they certainly don't build them like this anymore. Not only could the T-51B be hardened utilizing a special chemical process, it could be winterized against the harsh snows of Anchorage and similarly cold climates. Its survival in the harsh heat of California, Nevada, and similarly desertified areas of the wasteland also indicates it can protect and withstand exceptional heat as well. It was even so adept in its abilities that a form of the armor had been manufactured by West Tech in order to be given a prototypical artificial intelligence as one of the many tests the pre-war world conducted to replace or enhance humanity with machinery, though it was never finished. If you want to talk about the feel of the T-51, it's like classic military engineering. Heavy, but not clumsy, protective, yet designed for actual deployment. And as soon as it deploys, it's the first and last word in any battle you'll have. It's the suit that suggests the US industrial machine was still capable of real excellence, above and beyond all the corruption and decadence, right before everything collapsed. And after the war, from the Brotherhood to the Shu to the Enclave, the T-51 can still be found across America, as protective and widely regarded as it was in the old world. But here's the thing, Anchorage ends. The US wins, doesn't it? China certainly didn't think so. So instead of peace, the country starts unraveling. So what suit do you build when you're not just fighting enemies overseas, but trying to control your own home front? T-60. A domestic warning. The T-60 is spooky because it's not just late war tech. It's late war tech that turned inward. The little we know of the suit frames the T-60 as an advanced operational model developed before the Great War, intended as an upgrade to the original T-45 design, at least according to fan theories based off how the developers attempted to redesign T-45 for Fallout 4, only to realize that they liked this new suit enough to make it a separate model. In-universe, after quiet testing between the government and West Tech, it entered service after the Battle of Anchorage, a mere 9 months before the nuclear apocalypse. Then comes the detail that makes T-60 feel dystopian. It wasn't used against the Chinese or other foreign threats to America. It was used extensively by the US Army and on the domestic front, enforcing order in a nation that was beginning to fall apart from constant riots, food shortages, and moral decay. So when you see T-60 in Fallout, you're not just seeing better armor. You're seeing a product of a government that's so stressed and brittle that it's deploying man-sized tanks against its own unrest, instead of taking any action to fix or better it. When you make a suit that has just become the savior of a world-changing war and turn it on your friends and neighbors in order to quell social unrest, it will only increase strife and the conflicts of soldiers, going from fighting their enemies to fighting their allies. The T-60 is strong in the sense of being the result of what the US managed to deploy at a nationwide scale before the bombs fell. It's the suit that still feels like an actual widespread military rollout, not a whispery prototype. Suits can still be found mid-deployment, whether from infantry fighting vehicles, checkpoints, or bunkers. Its design language supports that. It looks like a production evolution rather than an experiment or bare-bone effort. Big plates, that familiar silhouette, more mass. It screams that America had to build this fast and needed it everywhere. When the games and even the TV show frame T-60 as common among organized forces, like the Brotherhood, while still clearly higher tier, that supports the idea that it was a widely deployed mature platform. Of course, much like the T-45, the TV show introduces a severe flaw in the chest cavity in the armor that turns the armor from a protective shield into a giant coffin with an even bigger Achilles heel. Before the bombs fell, the T-60 was the suit that was built when Uncle Sam says, "We have two problems: riots and not enough giant metal suits to stop riots." After the war, the T-60 is the signature armor of the Brotherhood, and they're not as nice as they used to be. And if the T-60 was the last great suit to hit mass deployment, then the next armor is what happens when the US tries to leap into the future at the last possible second. X-01, the prototype. X-01 is perhaps one of Fallout's biggest instances of what could have been. It's described as a prototype model developed shortly before the Great War, and the last and most advanced model of power armor developed before the Great War, and it's framed as the predecessor to the post-war advanced power armor family used by the Enclave. Keep that in mind, because it's important. X-01 was not the best suit the US deployed, they had T-51B for that. X-01 was the suit the US was working on when the bombs dropped and time ran out. The suit even includes a deliciously Fallout corporate detail. The Nuka-Cola Corporation managed to secure a suit of experimental X-01 armor just prior to the Great War for Project Cobalt, tied to promoting Nuka-Cola Quantum. They plated it in a strontium-90 compound used in the soda and sealed it in a theme park zone for kids and adults to look at. That is such a Fallout sentence, the pinnacle of future military tech, and it gets used as a marketing stunt for glowing soda. T-45 had at least become military surplus, and T-51 was actively being produced. X-01 has no excuse, but it would go on to pave the way for one of the Enclave's few inventions after the Great War. Now, in terms of strength, X-01 is powerful because it represents a new design philosophy. It looks more sealed, more specialized, more inclined to make you think that whoever was designing it was thinking about advanced threats. Even the framing of it, the X in the name. X designates a prototype, and as a prototype, the X means that it was intended to surpass earlier T-Series models. In Fallout 76, Enclave notes indicate that what Nuka World did was simply a proof of concept that didn't become standard before the war ended development, but development continued at the White Spring bunker. Asked for by the Joint Chiefs on the oil rig, schematics for the X-01 and the next generation Vertibird model were sent at an unknown point in time before the collapse of the Enclave in Appalachia. This single email would determine the path the Enclave would take for the next 200 years. Even the X-01 silhouette reads like a suit designed around survivability systems, a complete detour from the utilitarian designs of the T-Series power armors, boasting an insect-like helmet, sealed shoulder and neck plating, integrated protection, and a kind of forward-leaning aggression, like a mantis getting ready to strike its prey. All of that fits a last-generation prototype built by a country desperate to dominate. And now we hit the real turning point, because after the Great War, the US fundamentally ceased to exist, but a certain faction still thinks it does, and they take the the X-01 idea and turn it into a uniform for their post-war would-be empire. Mark III, the Enclave's pride. If the X-01 is the prototype of the future of the United States, the Enclave's advanced power armor Mark E1 is the future fully realized on an assembly line for the worst people imaginable. Being developed off the pre-war X-01 design, overcoming its flaws, the advanced power armor was born. And by 2241, the Mark I became the standard service armor of Enclave soldiers when they weren't wearing T-51B or standard combat armor. Shortly after the destruction of the oil rig by 2246, it began being phased out by the allegedly superior Mark II. The advanced power armor suit is stronger in a different manner than T-51 or T-60 had been. Those suits were made by the pre-war United States fighting a global war against China. The Enclave's Mark I was made over the course of 200 years of refinement by a post-war faction that is smaller, more secretive, and more technologically concentrated, meaning fewer suits, but better quality, at least until the oil rig got blown up. Advanced power armor is designed by the military-industrial complex, and it shows. The Mark II emphasizes it as hardcore, wearing black coating with yellow eyes, and created with lightweight metal alloys reinforced with ceramic castings at key points. That's exactly what you'd expect from the Enclave. Every gram counts, every plate is engineered, and the suit is designed to operate as a long-duration battlefield platform. Whether it's burning tribal villages or going to war against the Brotherhood in NCR, Mark I does it all, and it does it the Enclave way. Thematically, the Mark I is terrifying because it's uniformed oppression. The Enclave doesn't wear scavenged armor. They wear production armor. It took decades, if not centuries, for much of the wasteland to recover enough to mass produce things at 1,000th of the level the pre-war world did. The Enclave have had their production lines running since the bombs fell, and they only stop when there's no Enclave left to run it. They look like the American government, and they certainly claim they are, but they're not. They're the elites and the misguided or brainwashed remnants of the old world pretending to be one. When Enclave soldiers show up in advanced power armor, they feel like a higher tier than basically everyone else besides maybe the Brotherhood. It took the combined might of multiple wasteland nation-states to beat them, and only because they were hundreds of soldiers going up against tens of thousands of wasteland survivors and warriors. But make no mistake, the Mark I was post-war tech supremacy weaponized. The Enclave took the apocalypse and said, okay, but what if we did it with branding? When you see those yellow eyes, that jet black paint, you know you're about to either perish or get into one of the toughest fights in your life. But the Mark I was only the beginning, because the Mark II is what happens when a faction with already unfair armor decides it still isn't unfair enough. Mark II, Enclave upgrade. The Mark II is the Enclave doing what they always do. They iterate, refine, and escalate. Being created with lightweight ceramic composites, providing more protection than standard advanced power armor, it easily knocks T-45 and T-51 out of the water. That phrase, lightweight and more protection, is a massive engineering flex. It implies improved materials science, better layering, and more effective energy dissipation. It's also tied directly to Enclave distribution, sets being issued to Enclave members at places like Navarro, which tells you this isn't just a lab curiosity. This is the idea that we are giving this to our troops. It was going to become standard issue armor for a group that had already become feared for good reason. The Mk2 is the point where Enclave armor feels less like a post-war improvement and more like the idea that this is what pre-war power armor would have become if the world had 10 more years. And from a strength perspective, Mach 2 is one of the clearest straight upgrade suits we have. Explicitly more protective, explicitly improved materials, explicitly deployed to Enclave forces. That was until the destruction of the oil rig. The oil rig reduced the Enclave's advanced technology from beyond pre-war levels to simply using pre-war technology. John Henry Eden certainly made lots of robots, but he couldn't replicate the Enclave science that produced the Mark I. So in the end, Colonel Autumn's Enclave simply created a look-alike that didn't actually work like the original and called it a sequel. This was despite the fact that it was barely better than the T-45, one of the first power armors ever made. Not only could it be defeated by basic plasma and laser blasts, which the T-51 overcame with ease, but it was only slightly more resistant to radiation, something the Enclave hated with a passion for corrupting their perfect genetics. Now, that's not to say the Enclave didn't try again. Sometime before the destruction of Raven Rock, a genuine attempt to recreate the superiority of the original Mark II was made, with some suits being created and deployed in elite operations. But with the destruction of Raven Rock, certain members took off with the armor, becoming rebels from the Enclave, while others who continued to wear the prototypical reproduction hunted them down for their stolen Enclave property. Still, while it took them over 30 years to remake, the Enclave did ultimately succeed at producing the Mark II, even if on a far more limited basis than they had intended. Visually, Mark II looks sleeker and more integrated than the Mark I, less of a prototype edge and more of mass-issue elite. You can almost feel the Enclave bureaucracy behind it. Requisitions, maintenance schedules, standardized deployment, and in Fallout, that kind of organization is powerful, all by itself. itself. But here's where things get interesting. Sometimes the idea of the strongest isn't about being the toughest wall. Sometimes it's about being the deadliest platform. And the next suit is basically power armor built around a specialty: energy warfare. Tesla, the specialist suit. Alright, let's talk about the suit that's less of a mere tank and more of a walking amplifier. The pre-war world made many advancements in technology. One of those advancements was the utilization of Nikola Tesla's various innovations on electricity. Innovations that would become not only regular Tesla armor, but something more. When the Enclave made their own innovations to power armor, they didn't just field standard advanced power armor. They also deployed mission specialists wearing variants of newly modified Tesla power armor for both the Mark I and II models, built around attraction coils mounted on the shoulders. While it's not reflected in-game, the Tesla variants offer improved energy damage output routed through the attraction coils, which can then be channeled into their energy weaponry to devastating effect. So, if you think a power armor firing a laser rifle or Gatling plasma at you is bad, imagine both the weapon and the armor becoming supercharged. That's not just armor, that's a system. And from a strength point of view, this matters because it reframes what power armor is supposed to be. It's not merely defensive plating. It's not just a platform either. It's a piece of technology that can integrate the elements around itself and change the rules of engagement. So if the Mark I and Mark II is the Enclave's best general issue, elite armors, the Tesla variants are the Enclave, saying, let's build a suit for the guy whose entire job is vaporizing you. Now, is Tesla stronger than MK2 in raw protection? Absolutely. Tesla is stronger in a battlefield sense because it's built to create an advantage, not just survive an encounter with mutants and wastelanders. It's the difference between the vanity of the idea of being unable to be killed, which is always proven wrong sooner or later, and the far more realistic situation of creating a spot where your opponent simply cannot win, especially when the games treat Tesla upgrades as improving energy output or dealing electrical effects. Tesla armor is the kind of suit that makes you realize the Enclave wasn't satisfied with being a tank. They wanted to be a tank with a lightning rod on it, announcing your death with a crack of thunder and leaving you nothing but ashes. Alright, so the Enclave has the best post-war iteration line, but the next suit is where we see a different faction do something genuinely impressive. Build a new power armor model to fight a brand new kind of apocalypse. Ultrasight fighting a plague army. Ultrasight power armor is perhaps one of the coolest pieces of Fallout lore because it's not just the basic idea of old world tech surviving. It shows the fact that post-war factions innovated, even if they did so under pressure. Ultrasight power armor was developed by the Appalachian chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel after the Great War to take advantage of the anti-scorched properties of Ultrasight. What are the scorched? Long story. And Ultrasight, an even longer story. To make a long story short, scorched are rock fungus zombies with giant mutant bats spreading their infection. Using Ultrasight as a key material allowed additional armor plating and radiation shielding on top of the pre-existing T-51B frame and armor, but it also put increased strain on the suit's cooling systems, making it prone to leaking coolant. That trade-off is very believable as post-war engineering. After all, it was invented by Lost Hills Brotherhood scribe Haley Takano, former scientist and writer for Tesla Science magazine, who had actually written several issues on the subject of power armor and its applications. Because the Brotherhood in Appalachia weren't swimming in pristine factories, they were usually left working with limited resources, limited time, and the scorched plague, and all the plague zombies and spreaders it had created. So they went ahead to make a suit that's tougher and more shielded, but it runs hot and stressed. All's fair in love and war, isn't it? Just the anti-scorched angle alone isn't the only thing that earns Ultrasight its strength ranking. Because it's built off the T-51B, this suit isn't just about stopping bullets. It's about surviving a world where the enemy isn't only gunfire, it is the fear of contamination, the myriad of environmental hazards, and a hostile ecosystem. The fact that Ultrasight is a rare and specialized mineral only obtained from fighting back the scorched and harvesting their hotspots showcases that the armor isn't meant for everyone. Its creation was specifically meant for key knights and paladins of the Brotherhood, and for the key operations they went on. If you're wearing Ultrasight power armor, it meant that all of the Appalachian Brotherhood were counting on you to succeed. Unfortunately, the original owners died before they could ever wield it. But hey, at least Roger Maxson and the residents of Vault 76 get suits. The Ultrasight power armor is strong because it's specialized, hardened, and built with a material choice specifically intended to counter the region's most existential threat. And for that reason, it's widely regarded as one of the best power armors the Appalachian area can offer. But if Ultrasight is the Brotherhood adapting to a new horror, then the next suit is the opposite energy. The old world didn't adapt. It was planned, it was hoarded, and it built a suit for the people whose job was protecting the last secrets of America. T-6 T-65, the Secret Service. The T-65 power armor is strong in the way a vault's front door is strong. It's not flashy, it's not experimental most of the time, but in the end, it's just brutally overbuilt. What little we know of the T-65 as a set of power armor is that we at least know it was utilized, or at least had the potential to be manufactured by the Secret Service in Vault 79. Now don't get confused, these aren't the Frank Horrigan types of the Enclave. These are the true remnants of the pre-war US government tasked with protecting the entirety of America's gold reserves from Fort Knox. Vault 79 itself is described as being constructed in secret from 2072 onward, with no expenses spared for concealment, including using a different concrete contractor and having government agents acquire land under false pretenses. That context matters, because it tells you the kind of world T-65 was built for, a world where the US government assumed society might collapse and prepared to operate in the ashes. Even the wider Secret Service lore in Appalachia frames them as being placed in charge of protecting Vault 79 and its gold reserves, alongside members of the US Armed Forces, in order to assist anyone who was a legitimate claimant to the tremendous task of rebuilding America. So the T-65 isn't frontline infantry armor, it's a continuity of government armor. Even the name should give an indicator. It's not T-51B or T-45, it's T-65. 5 models after the T-60, the same armor that the pre-war government used to keep people in line and doing what they were told. It's the suit designed for the people who were supposed to still be standing when everyone else was gone. And if your job is guarding the last national wealth reserves and the infrastructure behind it, you don't wear a prototype. You wear something designed to keep you alive against anything. Raiders, radiation, sabotage, and time itself. For gameplay's sake, T-65 has top-tier raw resistances in Fallout 76, which fits the lore implication of it being a form of elite government gear. But even if you ignore numbers completely, the premise alone, the Secret Service, Vault 79, its gold reserves, the secrecy of it all, screams that this is not casual equipment. Even in the original concept art, it was designed to have a heavy grenade launcher and even a ballistic shield, something no other power armor is needed, but T-65 would use to boost its fright and protection factor. T-65 is the kind of suit that makes you feel like you can punch a brick wall, and then file the wall for damages. So we've got the Brotherhood's innovation suit. We've got the government's forever power suit, which leaves one question left. What happens when the Enclave has 2 centuries to keep upgrading power armor like it's their favorite hobby? Enclave Hellfire. The boiling point. Hellfire is the suit that feels like the Enclave finally stopped trying to look like soldiers and started trying to look like a myth. The creation of Hellfire remained a mystery for years, until Fallout 76 gave us the details. In Appalachia, at the White Spring Bunker, a prototype version of Hellfire was developed within a few years following the Great War. In October 2080, one prototype suit was sent to Vault 51 via a falsified requisition orchestrated by Zax 1.3C, a super-intelligent artificial intelligence impersonating Vault-Tech's head of Future Tech, and the man responsible for the vaults to begin with, Dr. Stanislaus Brown. Unfortunately, the suit's wearer, the overseer of Vault 51, became infected with the Scorched Plague soon after. But the armor's development was not completed until 22-77 at the Enclave's facility at Adams Air Force Base, after reallocating resources from the concurrent Duraframe Ibot project into the Hellfire project. The enhanced materials and metal from the Duraframe refinement process enabled the Enclave to create many more Hellfire suits for their most elite forces, including Sigma Squad. That timeline gap is a big deal, because it means Hellfire isn't another early post-war improvisation. It might have been created earlier, but it was fully enhanced through late-stage refinement. It's what you get when a technologically advanced faction keeps researching, iterating, and pushing power armor forward while everyone else is just trying to survive mutants, starvation, and dehydration. In other words, Hellfire is the Enclave taking centuries of power armor doctrine, the X-Echo-1 concepts, the advanced power armor iterations, and alongside the Tesla variants, turned the Hellfire into the final product. And while Fallout loves leaving many of the technical specifics vague, the role is clear. Hellfire is elite. It's the kind of armor that shows up when the Enclave wants overwhelming force on the ground, carried by troops meant to be the hardest to kill. And make no mistake, Sigma Squad and the Enclave remnants who later showed up to the Commonwealth to recover stolen or lost Enclave assets will be tougher to kill than the fiercest Deathclaw. Hellfire looks like it's meant to wade into the worst conditions imaginable. It's in the name. You're going to be throwing Hellfire at your enemies while being resistant to almost everything, especially fire. They try to throw back at you. The suit is bulkier, like a slab of metal, accompanied by the heavy incinerator it's more than likely going to be carrying. Much like the other Enclave suits, the Hellfire can survive what burns up normal armor. That tracks with the general idea of it being the most advanced Enclave development line reaching maturity. Now, for the verdict. Is the Hellfire the strongest power armor in all of Fallout? Not counting the half-dozen other suits power creeping 76's power armor scale, it's safe to say that in a fair fight against all of the other power armors in the series, the Hellfire will wipe out several of them in an instant, burn through some of the stronger models, and win out by a thin margin against the other strongest power armors. So, a clear champion. If you want to see Fallout 4's most disturbing mysteries explained, click the video on the screen.